بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين الحمد لله رب العالمين وأفضل الصلاة وأتم التسليم على سيدنا ونبينا وحبيبنا وسندنا محمد قائد الغر المحجلين وعلى آله وأصحابه وأتباعه إلى يوم الدين. اللهم فقهنا في الدين وعلمنا التأويل وألهمنا بفيض فضلك رشدنا يا رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, in our lessons on Nur al-Idah of Imam Abu-l-Ikhlas Shurunbulali rahimahullah ta'ala, we've reached the section on moon sighting in fasting. And the purpose of this class is not to argue. And they say, we do not engage in moon fighting. Right? So there's a couple of general principles, which is, firstly, the majority position with respect to moon sighting is that to the beginning of the Islamic months, if we step back, the beginning of Islamic months takes place by the sighting of the moon. Right? By the sighting of the moon, whichever month that may be. In general, and there are general texts related to that, and specifically related to Ramadan, because Ramadan is simply an Islamic month. Right? Ramadan in itself is simply an Islamic month. So the same principle would apply to Ramadan as would apply to any other month in that sense. But there are specific texts related to sighting the moon with respect to Ramadan. But those specific texts come in the context of the wider duty. How do we establish the beginning of a month? By the sighting of the moon, because our calendar is a lunar calendar. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells us, فَمَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْ. Whoever of you witnesses the month, right? And witnessing the month is by witnessing the moon. And the Prophet ﷺ said, and you can see some of those texts in Imam Shurunbulali's Maraq al-Falah. The Prophet ﷺ said very clearly, صُومُوا لِرُؤْيَتِهِ وَأَفْطِرُوا لِرُؤْيَتِهِ. Fast for seeing the moon. Fast when you see the moon. And end fasting when you see the moon. And if it is cloudy, then complete 30 days. And in Arabic, the term ru'ya, the meaning of ru'ya is to see with the eyes. That is the meaning of ru'ya in the Arabic language. Right? So it is the command is considered to be a clear command in that regard. So that's why it's the position of all four schools of Sunni Islam, their predominant position, that actual sighting of the moon is required. That's the position of all four schools of Sunni Islam. That actual sighting of the moon is required. We will be looking at some of the procedural matters, but to summarize the issue, actual sighting of the moon is required. The difference of opinion does exist with respect to whether calculations can take the place of moon sighting. Because the sighting of the moon is not a new matter. It was actually much more important to be able to sight the moon and to know the phases of the moon in pre-modern times, because they relied upon it for a whole number of things. And Sheikh Hamza Yusuf has an excellent article related to that. So calculating when the moon would be born, even to the hour and the minute, is something that not only the Chinese, the Indians, the Greeks, different peoples in Africa, elsewhere, like in Abyssinia, it's well established that they were well able to calculate. They had records. So this is not a new thing that now we can calculate. They're always, it's a visible phenomenon, right? It's not like, some hidden chemical component that only got discovered now. Right? So just like other natural phenomenon, when people are a lot more dependent, so even keeping track of tides was done a lot. Coastal populations kept track of the tides a lot more in past times than they do now. So, but that opinion does exist. That opinion does exist, particularly in the Shafi'i school, but also a weak minority opinion within the Hanafi school. So it's not condemnable. It is not condemnable, such that if someone is doing it, it follows the fiqh of giving nasiha. If you're hopeful they listen to the nasiha, you give it. But it's not something that you have to launch a campaign against. Right? And it's foolishness. Right? So someone says, well, we follow such and such national organization that follows calculations. It follows the fiqh of nasiha, but don't go around attacking people or organizations. And that's what the ulama generally state. That does not mean we say that position is valid. It goes against the relied upon position of all four schools, and the Muslims will not agree on calculations. So it's not even from what we can call juristic stratagem that you should only promote something that in matters of judgment that people will be accepting. Then, so that's the issue of citing itself, but that there being a difference of opinion, so we don't condemn people. Like, someone saying, okay, we're following calculations and therefore we're having Eid tomorrow. You should not be the person who goes and says, it is not Eid tomorrow because, whatever. You should adopt the principle, thou shalt not moon fight. Thou shalt not moon fight. Then, which citing is sufficient? There are two positions within the mainstream of Islamic scholarship regarding that. There are two well-established positions within the mainstream of Islamic scholarship regarding that. And both are potentially understood from the command. Most clearly, the prophetic command, but it's also understood from the Quran that the Prophet said, Sumu li ru'yatihi. Sumu, let you fast. Right? And that plural address, who is it to? So one position is, it applies to all the ummah. Such that if the moon has been sighted anywhere in the world, everywhere, and it's established to have been sighted, that anyone anywhere else would be obligated to fast that day if they find out. That's what's called global sighting, ittihadul matali', that we don't consider different regions with respect to moon sighting. Classically, this was not normally that feasible, particularly across regions and continents, etc. So they said no. So some actually preferred local sighting as their starting point as a legal opinion. That's called ikhtilaful matali', having differing points of sight. But they are both well-established positions within Islamic scholarship and not a matter of absolute right and wrong. there are many procedural elements related to moon sighting, of how the sighting is established, how it is verified, when does it become binding on the individual, and when would it be declared to the public that it is a day of fasting. So we'll see some of that, bi'idhnillahi ta'ala, as we look at what Imam Shurunbulali has to tell us. Rahimahullahu ta'ala. So Imam Shurunbulali tells us, فصل فيما يثبت به الهلال. The chapter on what establishes the hilal. And وفي يوم الشك, and fasting the day of doubt. وغيره, and other matters. So this is the second part of the class that we're going to take out. Now we'll look at the definition of the day of doubt. Right? And if you've prepared for the class, you'll be aware of it. But basically, if you're in doubt about the day of doubt, don't fast it. Simple as that. So how does one establish Ramadan? He tells us, يثبت رمضان برؤية هلاله. Ramadan is established by seeing its new moon. أو بعد شعبان 30 إن غم الهلال, or by completing 30 days of Sha'ban, the month preceding Ramadan, if the cloud cover concealed the new moon. So we couldn't tell whether there's a new moon. So moon sighting is required. If it was cloudy, then we complete Sha'ban as 30 days. So the ru'ya referring to here is the ru'ya al-basariya, eyesight. Right? And we discussed in the introduction that being the majoritarian position. He takes a brief interlude about the day of doubt, which is that he says, وَيَوْمُ الشَّكِّ هُوَ مَا يَلِي التَّاسِعَ وَالْعِشْرِينَ مِنْ شَعْبَانَ. The day of doubt is the day that comes after the 29th of Sha'ban. وَقَدْ اسْتَوَى فِيهِ طَرَفَيِ الْعِلْمِ وَالْجَهْلِ. And we are in genuine doubt, such that we neither know whether it's Ramadan nor are ignorant about it. بأن غم الهلال, such that the new moon is clouded over fully, so we couldn't see it. So it could be Ramadan or it could not be Ramadan. That's the definition of the day of doubt. Do you fast the day of doubt? And the basic answer is, if you are in doubt, you do not. And there are prophetic prohibitions against fasting the day of doubt. So in general, you don't. Right? Particularly if you approach it with the perspective that, oh, maybe it's Ramadan, so let me be safe and fast. That is, if you fast the day of doubt, out of doubt, then you must break that fast without doubt. And if you want to fast the day of doubt because of doubt, then without doubt you must break that fast, right? Because that is from excessiveness. Right? That is from excessiveness. The default would be, if you could not see the moon, what do? You complete Sha'ban is 30 days. So, which is why he says, وَكُرِهَ فِيهِ كُلُّ صَوْمٍ. All fasts are disliked on the day of doubt, which is the day after the 29th, when it was cloudy, such that if the moon was visible, it wasn't seen. So that is the day of doubt. And fasting in it is makruh. It's makruh tahriman. إلا صوم نفل جزم به بلا ترديد نيته بينه وبين صوم آخر. Except if you made the intention there of fasting a nafil without having any sense in your intention that I'm fasting a nafil, and if it's Ramadan, it's Ramadan. And they say most people cannot have that intention. Most people can't and won't have that intention. If it needs to be explained to you how to have that intention, then you have doubt about the day of doubt. And they used to say only ulama and students of knowledge should even consider fasting it. But they say most students of knowledge, basically anybody who needs to ask about it, they're confused. And if you're confused, you're not going to be able to have a pure nafil intention. And it's sort of theoretical in our times anyways, because declarations of fasting are made. وَإِنْ ظَهَرَ أَنَّهُ رَمَضَانَ أَجْزَأَ عَنْهُ مَا صَامَهُ. But if after the fact it becomes evident that that day was Ramadan, that nafil intention would be sufficient. And we saw from the fiqh of intentions how that would count. But in general, we don't fast this day. وَإِنْ رَدَّدَ فِيهِ بَيْنَ الصِّيَامِ وَفِطْرٍ لَا يَكُونُ صَائِمًا. But if one had doubt about the very intention, such that if it's Ramadan, I'm fasting, if it's not, I'm not, then you're not even fasting. Because an intention has to be decisive. Just as if you're praying in the boardroom and you have the intention that, okay, I'm praying, but if my boss comes in, I'm not, you're not praying. If your boss is genuinely an Islamophobe, you just intend to pray. Then, and he was let go for a few potential murders, you have some evidence that he might have murdered a few Muslims in the past, but you kind of need the job. So you intend to pray, then in the prayer, you may decide that you break the prayer if he comes in. But don't make the intention beforehand. Okay, so here, fasting the day of doubt is disliked to fast. The exception is if someone intended only the nafil on the day after the 29th. That would be allowed and it would count as Ramadan. But it would be makruh tahriman, prohibitively disliked, if you had a vacillating intention. I'm doing a nafil, and if it's Ramadan, it'll count as Ramadan. That puts you have doubt about what you're fasting. It'd be sinful to fast because it's going against prophetic teachings. Now, if it's going against prophetic teachings, then why can you fast it? Because some of the Salaf did. Some of the Sahaba did fast that day. And the explanation was, they only intended a nafil. And if you vacillate between fasting and not, you're not fasting. Okay. And those people talk about Nur, I just have artificial lighting on my face. Okay. وَكُرِهَ صَوْمُ يَوْمٍ أَوْ يَوْمَيْن مِنْ آخِرِ شَعْبَانٍ. It is makruh to fast a day or two from the end of Sha'ban. لا ما فوقهما, not beyond that. So it's also prohibitively disliked to fast a few days before Ramadan, particularly if it's out of a sense of excessiveness. What's the sense of excessiveness? That you say that just to be safe, let me fast a few extra days. And that is from the excessiveness that ruined the people before us. What did they do? They're commanded to do something, so they overdid it. They overdid it. And then they could not sustain it. And the Prophet ﷺ said, بُعِثْتُ بِالْحَنِيفِيَّةِ السَّمْحَةِ السَّهْلَةِ. I was sent with the upright yet easy and easygoing religion. And the Prophet ﷺ said, لَنْ يُشَادَّ الدِّينَ أَحَدٌ إِلَّا غَلَبَ. No one makes the religion unduly difficult except that it will overwhelm them. And one of the aspects of making unduly difficult is taking on more as obligatory than what has been made obligatory for you. So, fasting a few days before before Ramadan, just in case, or it's makruh. Actually, from halfway through Sha'ban, one does not fast. Unless one has a habit of fasting, one can maintain the habit. Right? So a day or two before Ramadan is disliked, not earlier than that. On the day of doubt, now this is a procedural matter, that if we had a situation where after the 29th, we have a cloudy day, so the eve of the 30th of Sha'ban, potentially the eve of the 1st of Ramadan, it's cloudy, so we can't see the moon. We can't see the new moon. What do we do? What does the religious scholarship do? This is rarely the case, especially if you go with global sighting now. وَيَأْمُرُ الْمُفْتِي الْعَامَّةَ بِالتَّلَوُّمِ يَوْمَ الشَّكِّ. The Mufti commands the Muslim community, the commonality, to hold back on the day of doubt. Hold back meaning don't intend to fast and don't do anything that goes against the fast. ثم بالإفطار إذا ذهب وقت النية. Then he commands them to break their fast. Then he commands them to eat when the time of intention goes. And what's the time of intention again? Till when can you make the intention to fast? Yes, the Dahwatul Kubra, which is the Islamic midday, halfway between the entering of Fajr time and the entering of Maghrib time. So, ثم بالإفطار إذا ذهب وقت النية ولم يتبين الحال. And then he commands them to break the fast, meaning to eat. Here, iftar, meaning to eat if the time of the intention goes. It's past the midday and it's not apparent whether this is Ramadan or not. ويصوم فيه المفتي والقاضي ومن كان من الخواص. And the day of doubt is fasted by the qadi, the mufti, and the elect. The elect meaning the learned. Who is the elect here? He defines them. وهو من يتمكن من ضبط نفسه عن الترديد في النية. So on that kind of day, the khawas are anyone who is able to be unequivocal within themselves without any hesitation regarding their intention. Their intention is clear. I am fasting a nafil. They have no intention that it be for Ramadan, this or that. Then they can fast that day. وَمُلَاحَظَةِ كَوْنِهِ عَنِ الْفَرْضِ. And without any consideration that this could count as a fard. In general, even if you're asked straight up, do we fast the day of doubt? If someone asks, answer is no, we don't fast the day of doubt. Because for someone who can have a firm intention that I'm fasting a nafil, it's not a day of doubt. Because they're not in doubt. So the Mufti tells people to wait, then he tells them then to not fast after the midday, the Mufti, the Qadi, and the Khawas, the learned, can fast. They don't have to, they can fast. And who is meant by that? We took anyone who can have just an unequivocal intention of a nafil. Okay. How do we establish moon sighting? And here, of course, the counsel is reiterated to you that do not ever engage. Doesn't matter how much you learn, do not engage in moon fighting. If you want to contribute to solving the moon sighting problem, join community efforts in solving the issue. Find the most learned and wise scholars that you know, community leaders, and work towards a communal solution and help them, whether it be technologically, in other ways. That's how. But if uncles and aunties are discussing moon sighting, go to another room. Right? There's nowhere else to go. Go to the washroom. The washroom is not a toilet, and you can go there and you can relax. You can even sit on the side of the bathtub and just review your weekly calendar or your to-do lists. Any person with any semblance of intelligence would have some personal management system, right, for your days and weeks. And as you know, even during the time of Shakespeare, they had tablets. And there's actually a whole book about it. I think the book was called Shakespeare's Blackberry or Shakespeare's Tablet. Because during the time of Shakespeare, it was very popular in society that they would keep little slate tablets, okay? and chalk or other writing device. So they keep their reminders and stuff on that, and they would keep them nicely chiseled and stuff, so it was not rough around the edges. But it's always the case that you keep track of what things you have to do. So there's lots to do, but one does not. And also because, as Sayyidina Ali ibn Abi Talib said, that if everyone who doesn't know kept quiet, most dispute would end. So even if you're like, alhamdulillah, I've been back 16 years, I've never entered a single discussion on moon sighting ever. And we have at least one half of the family, it used to be quite passionate about discussing this year in, year out. And it takes two to discuss. And if you don't, then eventually people get silent. And one of the best ways of winning an argument is by keeping quiet in the argument. As my wife would bear witness to. She wins every argument we have because she doesn't say anything. Okay, establishing moon sighting. Okay. So, moon sighting has two components. There is the personal sighting, and then there's what establishes community sighting. So at the personal level, it's quite straightforward insofar as if you see it and you're sure you've seen it, you are obligated to fast, even if they don't accept your witness. If you are sure. Of course, if you have doubts, that's a different matter. It's possible to be mistaken. Right? So we have to be clear that there's two levels of sighting. Right? There's sighting that's personally consequential. You are camping on the eve of Ramadan, and you're in this pristine nature reserve, and you went outside, and you're an upright Muslim, you're not taking any haram or hallucinatory substances, deliberately or by accident. So you didn't have some shady mushrooms or anything in your omelette. So you saw the moon. It's just you. So you got in your Subaru and headed into town and went to Qadi Yusuf, who is responsible for moon sighting, and you explained what you saw, and he doesn't believe you. Because you're the only one who saw it. Because everywhere else there was cloud. but you saw it. So you yourself are obligated to fast if you did see it. So we can see the sighting has a personal implication and a communal implication. A personal implication and a communal implication. So that's what we will look at next. What if one's sighting is rejected? So he says, rahimahullah ta'ala, وَمَنْ رَأَى هِلَالَ رَمَضَانَ أَوْ الْفِطْرِ. If anyone sees the crescent moon of Ramadan or the crescent moon of the end of Ramadan, of the Fitr, وَحْدَهُ, alone, وَرُدَّ قَوْلُهُ, and their testimony is rejected. Rejected by whom? By the Qadi or the Mufti, the one responsible for the communal establishment of the month. لَزِمَهُ الصِّيَامِ, they are personally obligated to fast that day because they saw it. مَنْ شَهِدَ مِنْكُمُ الشَّهْرَ فَلْيَصُمْهُ. Whoever of you sees the month, let them fast. وَلَا يَجُوزُ لَهُ الْفِطْرِ بِتَيَقُّنِهِ هِلَالَ شَوَّالِ. However, the person who alone sees the hilal of Shawwal, the moon for the beginning of Shawwal, the month after Ramadan, it is not permissible for them, the one who is sure that they have seen the new moon that marks the end of Ramadan and the beginning of Shawwal, it is not permitted for them to stop fasting. Why? Because there's a duty of caution. The duty of caution with respect to fasting. You saw the moon and you're sure. Moral caution entails you must fast. But end of the month, you went camping again. Next time, Qadi Yusuf is also your mamu. He said, beta, next year, don't go camping beginning of the end of the month. Just stay in town. Help me out. Right? So, caution at the end of the month entails that you're sure you saw the moon, nobody else did, that you continue to fast. Because there's a possibility that you could be mistaken. Because normally the moon is seen by more than one person. وَإِنْ أَفْطَرَ فِي الْوَقْتَيْنِ قَضَى وَلَا كَفَّارَةَ عَلَيْهِ. In both cases, if they break their fast, right, if they saw the moon, witness was rejected, and what did they have to do? If they saw the moon for the beginning of the month, and they didn't fast, what do they have to do? What's their moral duty? To fast, right? But they didn't. Qada is required and they're sinful, but kafara is not required. Because kafara, the expiation, is only for major violations. Anything in which there's an element of doubt or excuse lifts the expiation. The same thing with the end of the month as well. The end of the month, they're sure they saw the hilal of the end of Ramadan, of Shawwal, but their moral duty, their wajib is that they fast, correct? But they didn't. They have to make up that day, but no expiation is required in this case either. ولو كان فطره قبل ما رده القاضي في الصحيح. And this also is true even if they broke the fast before the Qadi rejected them. In our scenario, Jack the camper, brother Jack the camper, came into town and he's standing there and he sees Qadi Yusuf looking all stern in his, because Qadi Yusuf's slight in frame, but he's wearing a big jubba and a turban that's probably inherited from the previous Qadi, who's a big guy. But he's looking kind of scary. And he's a bit stressed. Because Qadi Yusuf uncle won't accept my testimony. So he takes out an energy bar and eats it. And so even if you broke the fast before your testimony was rejected, of course, you did the wrong thing. Qada is required. Also, repentance is required, of course. But kafara is not required. Kafara is lifted, and we'll be coming to kafara by any excuse or doubt. Right? Because it's no longer a clear violation. So we fast if we see the moon for Ramadan or Eid. We're not allowed to break it, even if certain. And if one breaks the fast, one makes up, but there's no expiation in this case. This is a case of private sighting. Now, many people get enthusiastic about moon sighting, and it's good. It is a sunnah, collective sunnah, I would say collective obligation to sight the moon, and you're fulfilling a sunnah to go out for moon sighting, but learn what you're doing before you do it. Learn what you're doing before you do it, because it is easy to get wrong. It's easy to get wrong. And in many communities, they have long-standing traditions of moon sighting. And they go out. And one of the beautiful communities, and it's a Muslim minority community, Cape Town, South Africa, they have a beautiful tradition of going out to sight the moon. And it's very beautiful because it's right by the ocean. And you can see moon sighting in Cape Town. There's some beautiful, beautiful images. But even the learned can get confused. And there's a beautiful incident of Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik radiallahu ta'ala anhu. He went moon sighting when he was very elderly. Sayyidina Anas lived past 100 because the Prophet ﷺ made 3 du'as for him. For long life, and for great wealth, and many children. And he lived past 100, one of the oldest living Sahaba, radiallahu ta'ala anhum ajma'in. And he had so much wealth, he had to hire people to distribute it. And he lost count of the number of children he had, radiallahu ta'ala anhum. But in his old age, his sight weakened. So he went out with one of the great qadis of human history, Qadi Shuraih. They call him Aqda al-Arab, the longest serving jurist amongst the Arabs, the longest serving judge amongst the Arabs, or the most adept, of the most adept of the qadis amongst the Arabs. And they went out to sight the moon. No one saw it. And everyone's looking in a direction. Sayyidina Anas ibn Malik, the great companion of the Prophet ﷺ, the khadim of Rasulullah ﷺ, he's looking in a different direction. And he said, I can see the moon. So everyone looked in the direction and no one could see it. And Shuraih said this is one of the most difficult moments in his life. Because as the qadi, how can I reject the testimony of the khadim of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, one of the great ulama of the Sahaba? He's a brilliant jurist and judge. So Shuraih looked carefully at Sayyidina Anas bin Malik, and he noticed that there is a hair from his eyebrow hanging over his eye. So Sayyidina Shuraih went up to him and he lovingly rubbed the eyebrow of Sayyidina Anas. He says, أَتَرَاهُ الْآنَ يَا خَادِمَ رَسُولِ اللَّهِ صَلَّى اللَّهُ عَلَيْهِ وسلم. Said, do you now see it, O Khadim of the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Sayyidina Anas looked up again. He says, no, I don't. He says, وَالْحَمْدُ لِلَّهِ عَلَى ذَلِكَ. And may Allah be praised for that. Radiallahu ta'ala anhum. So this is if one's sighting is rejected. And then, if the sky is obstructed, right? If there's obstruction in the sky, meaning it's cloudy, or there's some other, the city's been enveloped in a dust storm, for example, or the like. He says, وَإِذَا كَانَ بِالسَّمَاءِ عِلَّةٍ. If there's some obstruction in the sky, normally clouds, but it could also be due to unusual obstructions such as dust storm or the like. من غيم أو غبار ونحوه, from clouds or dust or the like. قبل خبر واحد عدل أو مستور في الصحيح. The report of one upright person or a person who's of unknown uprightness but with no discernible corruption, the mastur, is accepted according to the strong opinion. ولو شهد على شهادة واحد مثله ولو كان أنثى أو رقيقا أو محدودا في قذف تاب لرمضان. Right? It says if one person bears witness to their witness, right, that yes, this person saw it, even this person is a woman or a slave, or they're punished for false accusation, this would be enough to establish Ramadan. ولا يشترط لفظ الشهادة, but this is a confirmation. It is not a formal bearing of witness, because formal bearing of witness requires minimally 2 witnesses. So here it's a confirmation of the report. This person is correct in what they're saying. This is considered ikhbar, not shahada. This is a report. It is not a witness. So one person's informing is accepted if the sky is fully obstructed, right? Such that no one would have been able to see it. So procedurally, in every region, there should be enough people seeing it that this situation should not arise. It's conceivable. People are living, so Jack and Jill establish, Billsville. When Uncle Bill passed away, they established Billsville on the hill. There's only 10 people who moved there. They all became Muslim through the efforts of Ustadha Jill. So they only have one person who's witnessed, and they're they're disconnected from the grid, whatever. So there are many situations where this could arise and does arise. Even if they're of unknown uprightness, it can be accepted. And this is not considered from bearing witness. It's simply a confirmation of report. Okay. If the sky is occluded, what do we do with respect to Eid? وَشُرِطَ لِهِلَالِ الْفِطْرِ إِذَا كَانَ بِالسَّمَاءِ عِلَّةٍ. The condition for the hilal, for the end of Ramadan, to signify the day of Eid and the coming of the month of Shawwal, if the sky is occluded, لفظ الشهادة, actual testimony, like actual witnessing, min hurrain, from 2 free men, أو حر وحرتين, or 1 free man and 2 free women, bila da'wa, but no claim is required, because normally you can't simply go to court, say I want to bear witness against Uncle Tariq. Is there anyone making a claim against Uncle Tariq? Said no, but I just wanted to put it out there that Uncle Tariq was eating pork in the middle of Ramadan, and he stole that from my non-Muslim neighbor. Is your non-Muslim neighbor making a claim against him? Said no. Do you have a claim against him? No, but I want to bear witness. That's not accepted in court, because the basics of a court case are a claim and a defense and evidence to support the claim, right? Or in the absence of evidence to support the claim, which would normally be witnesses, or that which takes the place of witnesses. In the absence of witnesses, then the one who's being claimed against, who's defending themselves against the claim, they have to swear in negation. That's the basics. البينة على المدعي واليمين على من أنكر. The burden of proof is upon the claimant, said the Prophet ﷺ, and in the absence of that, the one negating must swear by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's the basic framework. But here, though this is like witnessing, right? So for the Hilal of Eid, two people have to bear witness that this sighting took place. But no claim is required for it, because this is not a legal bearing of witness, right? We're not establishing a case against anybody. Okay. And that's out of caution, right? Because the principle of continuity would apply with respect to the religious obligation. That if we don't have sufficient proof that the Ramadan's over, the assumption is Ramadan continues. That's if the sky is occluded. If the sky is not occluded, is not obstructed, he says, وَإِذَا كَانَ عفوا وَإِذَا لَمْ يَكُنْ بِالسَّمَاءِ عِلَّةٌ فَلَا بُدَّ مِنْ جَمْعٍ عَظِيمٍ لِرَمَضَانِ وَالْفِطْرِ. If there is no obstruction in the sky, I'm meaning to the actual witnessing, then it is necessary for there to be a large group to establish both Ramadan and to establish the end of Ramadan. ومقدار الجمع العظيم مفوض لرأي الإمام في الأصح. And the extent of what number is required for testimony when the sky is not occluded is consigned to the Muslim leader, meaning the person deputized by the Muslim leader to establish this. Is it enough for them to be 6 people, 10 people, 50 people who see it? And because the sky is clear and people are going to look for it, the moon doesn't hide. The moon is not his coy mistress. Right? Like it doesn't do an Andrew Marvell on us. So a large body of people is required to establish it. And this returns to it's a procedural matter for both Ramadan and Eid. Now, what about fasting the 31st day? What if we fast 30 days and the sky is clear and on day 31 it's clear and there's no crescent? So that's what he addresses next. Right? That's what he addresses next. That وَإِذَا تَمَّ الْعَدَدْ بِشَهَادَةِ فَرْدٍ. If the number is completed, the number meaning 30 days is completed through a singular witness. Right? So it was cloudy in the beginning of the month, so we established Ramadan by one person allegedly citing it. وَلَمْ يُرَى هِلَالُ الْفِطْرِ. But then after 30 days and the sky is clear, we don't see the crescent for the end of Ramadan. وَالسَّمَاءُ مَصْحِيَّةٌ. And the sky is clear. لا يحل الفطر. It is not permitted to break the fast, because it becomes clear that an error took place in the beginning of the month. واختلف الترجيح فيما إذا كان بشهادة عدلين. And the scholars differed about what we do if the beginning of the month was established by the witness of 2, because 2 is considered a legal proof. ولا خلاف في الحل إذا كان بالسماء علة. But there's no difference of opinion of the permissibility, i.e. of ending the fast if the sky is unclear. وَلَوْ ثَبَتَ رَمَضَانْ بِشَهَادَةِ الْفَرْدِ. Even if Ramadan was established by one witness. Right? So, but many of these things are procedural. Right? That if a single sighting would be accepted for Ramadan, when because then there is no sighting after 30 days of Ramadan, even though the sky was clear. If 2 people saw it, they differed, but the sky is obstructed at the end of the month and it's clear, we assume that next day is a day of, is the day of Eid. Okay. What about other moons, right? وهلال الأضحى كالفطر. The sighting of the hilal of Eid al-Adha, which would be, i.e., the sighting of the moon for Dhul Hijjah, follows the same principles as that of Fitr. ويشترط لبقية الأهلة, for other months, because other months people would not be that eager to sight the moon. شهادة رجلين عدلين حرين, the witness of two upright free individuals. أو حر وحرتين, or one free man and two free women. غير محدودين في قذف, none of whom were punished for false sexual accusation. So this is how. So other moons are established through similar process with some slight differences. Now what about global versus local sighting? He tells us rahimahullah ta'ala, وإذا ثبت أي الهلال أو إذا ثبت رمضان في مطلع قطر لزم سائر الناس في ظاهر المذهب. If the moon is sighted in any one land, it is incumbent upon all people in all lands according to the manifest position in the Hanafi madhab. وعليه الفتوى وأكثر المشايخ, and this is what the fatwa is upon in our madhab and the majority of the scholars. The majority position in the Hanafi school, as Imam Shurunbulali states here very clearly, is what we would term global sighting. Global sighting. If seen in one place, it is incumbent upon everyone, everywhere. I'm just teaching the text. I'm not taking any position on this matter. I used to have this thing that I will only take a position on certain points when I used to say I had a list of issues that I would address when it was 2020. And 23 years ago, that looked like a long ways away. Now it's 2023, and one day I'll write about it, but I have no position on these things. I'm just teaching the text and saying this is what the ulama state. Right? So the majority position in the Hanafi school is of global sighting. There's an established position of local sighting. There's also a position that's a synthetic position, that global sighting is theoretically true, but practically we go with local sighting. And you can look at this if you wish. What about seeing the moon by day? Sometimes during the day you can see the moon. Actually see it, not just see it in your dreams or daydreamings. وَلَا عِبْرَةَ بِرُؤْيَةِ الْهِلَالِ نَهَارًا. There's no consequence to seeing the crescent by day. سَاءٌ كَانَ قَبْلَ الزَّوَالِ أَوْ بَعْدَهُ. Whether one saw it before Dhuhr time, before the sun was past its zenith, or after. وَهُوَ لِلَّيْلَةِ الْمُسْتَقْبِلَةِ فِي الْمُخْتَارِ. Rather, that sighting would count for the next day, not for that day. Right? Now, there's this, classical auntie thing that often people say, look, it must be the second day of Ramadan. The moon looks big. The crescent looks big. That's the moon itself, and this has to do with issues beyond my scientific interest more than comprehension, that their light refracts, and an object as distant as the moon and the angle by which the light comes, sometimes the moon can look really big, other times it can look remarkably small, not tiny, but smaller, and that's just a natural thing. And we notice it more when the moon is full. Sometimes, there's the blood moon, the golden moon, all these kinds of things. We don't pay as much attention to it with the crescent, except when everybody's staring at it. And also because, and you ask the person, do you normally notice the crescent? Say, never, only Ramadan. Okay, maybe it's just your eyesight. So all that is just speculation. Right? A lot of aspects related to moon sighting of establishing moon sighting are procedural matters. And there's a strong element of judgment in it. there's a case for the Muslims coming together on at least locally, if not regionally, and if you take the global citing position, globally, to strive to agree to one set of procedural guidelines that are consensus guidelines. And that's what we should be working towards, establishing a sound, principled unity on this point. And most contemporary scholars would say that, or many great contemporary scholars would say that one can use calculations to negate clearly impossible citing. But there are nuances related to that. It's not as simple because visibility charts are probabilistic. They're estimations of whether the moon should be visible or should not be visible. They're based on judgment, and science is on these things, it's given to error. So the issue is a tricky issue. Inshallah, it'll get resolved. I will not comment on any country whatsoever. Ask the scholars of your land. Next section, inshallah, which we'll have on Sunday, we'll look at Babu ma yufsidu as-sawm. Babu ma la yufsidu as-sawm. That which does not break the fast, and then we'll look at what does break the fast. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina wa Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Any questions, Sadati? Go ahead. No, so the Muslim leader would be the one made responsible, right? So which would be, in a Muslim country, would be the authorities. So what does one do? Practically, I had 1 year when there's some controversy going on around moon sighting in Saudi, when two of the great scholars that I happen to know, Habib Omar and Sheikh Nuh, were both going on Hajj the same year. So I had several people say, tell them that to make sure they stand at Arafah the next day, because it's not the right day. I said, thank you. Jazakallah khair. Assalamu alaikum. Right? Of course, I did no such thing. Right? And that is the kind of thing that those matters are left to the authorities. And these things, if you want to engage in them, the issues of knowledge, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, فَاسْأَلُوا أَهْلَ الذِّكْرِ إِن كُنْتُمْ لَا تَعْلَمُونَ. Ask the people of knowledge if you don't know. They say, an unlearned doctor is a danger to bodies, right? But an untrained scholar is a danger to souls. So don't. People get into these. They have the website with all these proofs. Are these visibility charts? Where are the visibility charts from? The basic principle. No, just question everything. Are they revelation? Are they decisively true? What does a visibility chart mean anyways? Do you know? So no. Then why are you using that as proof against me? Prove that these visibility charts are reliable. Right? Are they based on actual sighting? No. Right? So there are a lot of things that are not quite what people imagine them to be. There was a time when doctors used to recommend different types of cigarettes. The Marlboro ads used to state, smoked by more doctors than any other leading brand of cigarettes. And so, things are not always as they seem to be. Anyways, I will not comment further on any of this. There's a question. How do we reconcile that we shouldn't fast the second half of Shawwal and the Prophet ﷺ fasting much of Shawwal because the deeds being raised in the month? So one doesn't fast the second half. So it is allowed to fast the second half of Shawwal if one has a habit of fasting. What is prohibited, disliked, is to fast the last couple of days if one did not have a previous habit, i.e., and is done out of that sense of caution. oh my God, I need to, then, if it's done out of the belief that it's better to fast, start Ramadan early, it would be sinful. If one does so out of this wariness, it'd be strongly makruh. But if one has a regular habit of fasting, one fasts Mondays and Thursdays, you can continue fasting Mondays and Thursdays, second half of Shawwal. If you regularly fast many days, you could fast a little more into the second half. But generally, the general sunnah is after the middle of the month, we don't fast unless you have an established habit, such as Mondays and Thursdays, etc. But if someone used to fast a lot outside of that, and it will not affect their Ramadan fasting in any ways, then if you'll notice that it doesn't, Jazakallah khair. Yeah. I also said Shawwal. That one's on you. Sha'ban. If one second half of Sha'ban. Okay. And so we'll stop there. Bi'idhnillahi ta'ala. Wa sallallahu ala Sayyidina Nabina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam. Walhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. And some of you do follow online. We will be having our Friday circle tonight. Barakallahu ta'ala bikum.